Could this be the year of the housing recovery? Joining us for this week's Smith Business Close-Up is Cliff Rossi, executive in residence at the Robert H. Smith School of Business and a former executive at Citigroup. Cliff, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Hard to believe that hard times in the real estate market have gone on for 5 years now.
That's right. It's actually home prices peaked sometime in mid-2006, depending on which index that you go with, but that's correct.
So how long does it last for? Do we risk this turning into a lost decade?
And many have actually thought about this. The comparison that you're referring there to is to Japan's 1990s style recession, where they got hit hard in real estate, among other things, and banking, and they have not quite fully recovered. And some people here, some economists as well, believe that we may be looking at something not unlike that for the next 3 to 5 years anyway, before we see any meaningful recovery in demand and supply coming back into equilibrium in housing.
So why is that? We have prices way below the levels where people were jumping over each other to buy properties 5 years ago. We have mortgage rates at historic lows. By that standard, it looks like there's some good deals out there.
You would think that, but there's much more of a behavioral aspect to this than anything else. It's all about psychology, and it's really about two things from the borrower standpoint. A, am I going to keep my job? And B, do I believe that when I buy this house that I'm not going to witness another 5 or 10% skid on my home prices from where they are when I buy them today? So those two things weigh very heavily in the minds of potential buyers, and it's one reason why you simply don't see as many buyers coming out as you otherwise would see in the market at this time, and that includes first-time home buyers as well.
Well, I was going to ask if you would advise a first-time home buyer to go buy a house at this point. I'll give you two scenarios. If one, it's a young family starting out, they plan to be in the house for a decade or two, or B, it's an investor looking at trying to do a little bottom fishing and snap up something that might be a rental property going forward.
Well, on that first scenario, the borrower that would be having the house for about 10 years, absolutely. You cannot time these markets like you can't time the stock market as well. So in my opinion, somebody coming in and buying now and holding for 10 years or even as long as 5 years, I think that would still wind up being an economic type of outcome for them. The only question I would have that would raise in my mind anyway is if they got relocated to another area or something like that. But barring that, I believe it would be a solid investment. Not the kind of investment that we saw in the years preceding the crisis. You're not going to see that double-digit type return come back, but nonetheless a moderate and more reasonable type of return. On that second scenario, somebody who's in it to try to flip it, I think those days are over, and I think trying to make the quick buck out there for housing just simply is not going to be the way to go in the future.
Before we go, let's talk a little about the government's role in the mortgage business. You're familiar with this from your former life in private industry. The government still has a huge role despite the blow up in the securitization market. Will that always be the case?
At some point, that will have to be unwound. And in fact, depending on who you talk to within the administration, they would very much like to see the share of government today represents between Fannie, Freddie, and FHA represent about 97% of all mortgages being securitized.
So nobody would get a mortgage if it wasn't for the government at this point?
That's effectively correct from the standpoint of who's financing the mortgages. So with that, the government really needs to bring private capital back into the marketplace, but that is a multi-year process for them to do so. So I would, and this being an election year, I would not look for much change in that with Fannie and Freddie, and I think that it'll probably be several years as well before we see a final fix on that.
Very good. Cliff Rossi joining us from the Smith School of Business. Cliff, thanks for your time.
Thank you.